Hey Tanya, how you doing
Hi,
today?
Mike. I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Hey, to all of our guests, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances podcast. We just had an awesome interview with Dr. Kim Harms, and it was definitely an experience, right, to learn about her story and what she went through. And Tanya, I wanted to ask you, like, what were some of the key takeaways you got from that?
So many. I mean, I don't think I've almost like cried like five times on a podcast that we've done. So there was that. There's just a lot of emotion in it. She's
There
been through
was.
a lot in her life, very significant loss, and just it makes me want to cry, tear up thinking about it. It's just very emotional. But she talks a lot about like the legacy you're leaving and having a really intentional fourth quarter, as you put it, of your life, making that one of the best times of your life instead of this time of like looking to death or avoiding death. So I think just that takeaway and how she helps people through her loss is just one of the most powerful things.
Yeah, actually, the fourth quarter of life is how you put it, which I thought was really awesome as we were going, and I never thought about it that way. And actually, now that I think about that, it makes me feel like I think I'm past halftime right now. Hey, okay. Anyway, but yeah, this episode definitely was very emotional, and just to see how somebody dealt with so much grief and loss and built so much resiliency out of that to continue to build their legacy and build what they built for their family that was left behind, right? So I think that was really amazing. So I think you guys are all in for a real treat today. Tanya and I both really enjoyed this one. And again, even talking about it now is it's pretty emotional because you'll just have to listen and
Yes,
find out.
you have to listen and make sure you take action. Like she tells you why it's important no matter your age. If you have a family legacy, even if you do or don't, just how important figuring that out now and getting that started is.
100%. All right, let's kick it off and get into this episode.
This is Brandon Turner, and you are listening to the Average Joe Finances podcast.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below. Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni.
And I'm your co host, Tanya Schultz, the Money Life Coach. And today's guest is Dr. Kimberly Harms. Welcome, Kim, to the podcast. We're so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we're excited to talk to you. And let's just kick this off with getting to know you a little bit better. So, if you could, can you share a little bit about yourself and share your story? Tell us, who is Dr. Kim Harms?
I'm 68, so that might be a long story. I'll try to keep it really short. I had an interesting life. I was missing some fingers due to thalidomide as a young when I was born, which caused some complications in my life, including my mother, who, when she found out thalidomide was the cause, because of course she didn't realize that until 6 years later, she ended up going into an institution, mental institution. She had a breakdown where she stayed basically the rest of her life. I lost her at 17. She took her own life. And I met this really cute guy when I was a freshman in college. His name was Jim Harms, and he wanted to go to dental school. And I thought, oh, I never thought about that because women in those days, there were very few women dentists. And I thought, if he wants to go to dental school, maybe if I became a dentist, he would marry me. And that would really be a good job that I'd have. So I decided to go to dental school, really to get married, which please do not have anybody out there do that. It worked in the 70s. It no longer works. Don't do that again. But of course, I had to work out the hand issue during that time. So I had some interesting stories about that. We went to dental school together and were married at 19. So my plan worked. It did work. We went to dental school together. Then we were in the public health service, which is a branch of the Coast Guard. And then we bought a practice in Farmington, Minnesota. We had three beautiful children, just absolutely wonderful kids. And my youngest son, whose name was Eric, started at Columbia University, was at his dream school. They recruited him. He was this brilliant engineering brain guy and jazz pianist, and he was elected to student council. He had this wonderful, came back his first semester in the dean's list on top of the world. He was in the jazz program. He could study engineering and play jazz. He was so happy. We were so excited. And then 2 weeks later, after 45 minutes after the breakup with his girlfriend, he took his own life at Columbia, and our world was devastated, completely torn apart. And then we had to work through that for quite some time. And then a year after Eric died, I found I had nerve damage in my drilling finger. So there went my dental career out the window. And my husband had a liver transplant right before Eric died. So he was just working part-time. And so I had to re-identify myself again. And a few years later, my daughter, who was a lawyer, decided she wanted to go into dental law and asked me to be her dental consultant. So I got back in. I had been the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association. I was also a national speaker for the American Dental Association. So I was doing a lot of stuff on the side. And I then worked with my daughter, which is a dream job because we were trying to get her to go into dentistry, and they're like, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. We're going into law. And then we got her back around. So I've been doing that for a few years. I was speaking all over the world in dentistry. And then my husband passed away 4 years ago. And at that point, I realized, wow, there's no real plan or about what we do in this last quarter of our life. We were retired. The big dream, we were going to retire, but I failed at retirement. I need to do something. I need to have something to keep me up every day. So I started writing a book about the legacies that we leave. And it's called, Are You Ready? How to Leave a Legacy to Die For? And it just helps you look at the legacies we leave. Then we have to face death and dying. I became a death doula. And the last part of the book goes step by step and all the things we need to do to get our affairs together, not only to make sure our children are financially sound, because we never know if that's going to happen, because we could end up in a nursing home for a few years. And if that happens, my kids, depending on how long I'm there, it might not be anything left. But emotionally sound. So I really want to focus on the emotional part. But in order to be emotionally sound too, you've got to make sure your other things are in order and done soundly and fairly. And so that's been the focus of my life now. And I'm really enjoying it. I now have 6 grandchildren. So that's my big focus in life. I'm working at my legacy there. And I'm just having a wonderful time working with people to help them get their legacies in order.
Wow. Kim, I just want to start off and say you've been through the ringer. Just hearing your background, you've dealt with tremendous loss. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child. And even at such a young age, I lost my mother when I was 18, different circumstances, but I know as a 17-year-old, that had to be pretty stressful and traumatic for you. And you've built something good out of your entire life, right? You've done some amazing things with that. So I just want to say, first off, you are definitely, what's the right word I'm looking for here? Resilient, very resilient.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the fact that you're able to give so much of yourself back to people after you've lost so much is just amazing. And I want to say thank you for what you do. And I'm really excited to chat with you today. I know Tanya and I are both, I'm sitting here watching her reactions as you're sharing your story too. We're both like, wow. Yeah, let's get into to what you do, because you've definitely been through a lot, but you also do a lot, right? Do you think that the fact that you had to deal with so much loss, that's something that motivated you to take a round turn on and focus on like the financial side versus like your passionate side, right? Because I know you got into dentistry because of love, young love, right? But do you think that shift happened when you realized, okay, like towards the end, we need to have a plan? What is that plan?
Yes. And when we take a look, when my husband passed away, and becoming a widow is really, losing a child, of course, I think is still number one, but boy, with becoming a widow, all of a sudden you just go, what the heck? What do I do now? I was married. I got married at 19. That dental thing worked. I got married at 19. We've been married all these
Wow.
years. I've never really been alone. You get up and all of a sudden there's nobody there. If you go off to the store, nobody knows where you are. All of a sudden you're alone. And it was really hard. And I had to think, here I am, as a woman, I'm between menopause and death. Those are the two signs that define me. What the heck do I do now? And what I realized is I looked at my grandchildren when my husband died, and they were just devastated. My children were devastated. I was devastated. And I realized the value of resilience. I realized the value of, I think because I'd had so many episodes, and also the fact when my husband died, he had a liver transplant 6 months before Eric died. We just had a horrible year. And he almost died every year after that. He would have all these, everything, just so many things would happen to him. Every year I would be faced that he was almost going to die. We thought he was going to die, and he didn't. And each one of those experiences gave me a little strength because I could picture, unlike Eric's death, which was sudden, it just destroyed, our view of the world. I can't even remember the first couple of years. The view of the world changes. But I realized the value of resilience and how important it was for my children and my grandchildren to understand that I'm going to go at some point. I hope to stay as long as possible, but I'm going to go at some point. And I wanted them to be resilient. I wanted to help them be resilient. And I know one of the things that I do with that is I talk to them. I talk to them about their pop-pop. And when I give gifts at Christmas, it's from Nana and Angel Pop-Pop. So I talk about pop-pop a lot. But I also talk to them about the fact sometime at some point I'm going to be gone too, and your other grandmas and grandpas are going to be gone. And we just want you to be happy. And I know this worked because I had a great experience about 3 or 4 months ago. My little Heidi, the one I had last night over, she's a little redheaded. She was 8 at the time. And she was sitting at the table and she looked up at me and she goes, Nana. And I knew something important was coming. And I said, yeah, Heidi, Nana, if what happened to Pop happens to you. And I said, oh, do you mean if I were to die? And she said, oh, yeah, Nana, if you were to die. And I said, okay, Heidi, go ahead. She said, Nana, if you were to die, can we still go to Disney World? Yes, you can still go to Disney World. I want you to be happy. I want you to live your life. I want you to know that I love you and my love will always be with you no matter what. But if I die, yes, I want you to go to Disney World. And what I'm not telling the grandchildren, because I don't really want them to look forward to my death, is I'm going to put aside a part of my will that specifically says, okay, I'm putting this amount aside. You guys go out and go on a big trip, because depending on when I die, it might not be Disney World, but a fun trip. I want you to go on a trip on me and just celebrate all the fun you have as a family together. I'm going to put that as part of my will. I also have a cleanup part of my will too, so they don't have to clean up my mess. I'll have a crew come in and clean my mess up. So I'm trying to make them resilient and have an easier time, a softer landing when I go.
Yeah.
I think what you're really talking about and what you focus on is leaving that legacy and leaving that impact on the future generations and not having that guilt and shame. As a financial coach, like one of the women I work with, I want to get my finances in order. She's in her early 50s or late 40s, early 50s, because my biggest fear is if I die, like my kids are going to see all this, like this money mess that I've created. And I don't want to like leave that for them to deal with and look at. And go get into the legacy part and how important that like fourth quarter coaching is for you, which I think is like something that people don't hear a lot. Like those transitions and times of the fourth quarter of people's lives when they might lose their partner. They have a lot, they're supposed to be in retirement, but now what do I do and all this stuff. So explain about the legacy part and how you help people today.
One of the things that I found that was really important, and one thing that we were fortunate is that now Jim and I had this wonderful plan. We had this beautiful home on a lake in northern Minnesota, just crystal clear in the national forest, and it was going to be our legacy to our children and our grandchildren. It was fabulous. But he died. So it wasn't really one for me to go up there by myself. Luckily, we had bought in an interim to be down closer to the kids. We had a little condo down here. And what I realized is when you get to my age and you're by yourself and you take a look at what's sucking your funds dry, right? Many times it might be we had a very large retirement home. So what I did is I sold that, and the money that I got from selling that is now going to pretty much support me the rest of my life because I live very inexpensively. I have downsized. My basic expenses are very low. And what that's allowed me to do, I'm actually going to be moving part-time also down to Kansas City. So I'm going to get a little apartment there, but that's something that's really easy for me to be able to get rid of quickly if I need to. So I know that from what I've planned in the past from my retirement, I have enough money coming in that I can live in this one place for the rest of my life, even if the stock market just goes crazy and goes under and there's nothing left. I've made that important because I do not want to be a burden to my children. I do not want to run out of money and be a burden. I do not want that to be my legacy. So I've arranged my lifestyle so that I'm not spending a lot of money. And then I'm able to enjoy it because I do a lot of travel because I've been making, and I'm still coaching people and I'm have the book out there. So there's some kind of money coming in on the side that I don't really have to work too hard for because I worked hard to write the book and I work hard to coach, but I have a program. I'm just launching right now a legacy online course that I'm giving. So I'm able to get some money coming in. I have the basic stable amount, so the kids are not going to have to take care of me. I have money coming in on the side, so I can go and have fun and take trips. I happen to have a lot of wonderful girlfriends that I've had for years and years, and we go on trips a lot. But if I have to buckle down and the world falls apart, I can buckle down and I can still live in my little condo here because it's all paid off. So I think that's when you're gathering when you're getting your legacy, the money legacy together, be careful. I'm careful with my money. Just be careful with it. And real estate was a great investment having that cabin. I was so sad. I never thought I would give it up. But I told the kids didn't really want it. They don't want our stuff. That's the thing. They just don't want our stuff. This is hard for us. We have to shed and get rid of stuff. So I've been shedding stuff all the time because they don't want it. And that again is part of our legacy because we don't want them to have to pick up after us and take all our stuff and go through it and spend a year in the farmhouse like some of my friends had to do. So I guess when it comes to money, my big legacies are save as much as you can, invest wisely, and have a small footprint so you're not spending, so you can live a long time.
Yeah, I like that. I think you're hitting on a lot of very important topics that I think people really need to pay attention to, especially and I like the way Tanya put this too with the fourth quarter planning, is you focus now on maximizing the income that you have, right? Maximizing
Yes.
not only that, but also what you're going to leave behind, right? The legacy that you're leaving behind.
Yes.
And by doing that, you're able to put yourself in a situation where you can enjoy. I hate saying this, it sounds so grim, but like the final chapter.
It is a fun,
And
but it
I know
is a
it's
final
just it's so
chapter.
it
Go
feels so
for it.
dark. It feels so dark. But yeah, but you get to really just enjoy and live life and spend that time with your grandchildren and and give them
Mhm.
something and leave something behind for them too, like you
Yes.
talked about. I like how you put in there in the will about taking a big trip and leaving that. I recently had a discussion with somebody, actually literally yesterday, about this, that when his mother passed, she had put money to the side for him to just do a big family trip and everything. And they used that to stay at the Star Wars hotel when it was open, Disney,
Oh.
where it was like an crazy amount per night to stay there, which is why it folded. But he got to tell me about that experience, and I was super jealous because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I don't know if you could tell, but it was something that was left behind for him that I thought, man, and it impacted him so much. I could see the joy in his face when he's describing this to me. So I thought, wow, that is just super awesome. I'm going off on a tangent here, but that just goes to show where your mindset is. And with that, how do you take what you've done for yourself and translate that into the people that you help, right? To the people that you coach.
Oh.
How do you translate that into the course that you are now providing? Like, what does that look like?
One of the things that's really helpful is that I've been there. I've been there. I work with widows and I
Sure.
work with people who are not widows. So I know that we have to reaffirm our identity when we retire. I was a dentist. When you're a dentist and you walk into the room and everything's prepared and you say hello to the patient, you don't even have to ask for your instruments. Say, put them in your hand. It's really, your ego can really grow in those situations. So you're going from this type of situation till now you're in there unplugging the toilet.
You're on your
You're living
own.
by yourself. You're on
Yeah.
your own and nobody does that for me. So you have to re-identify who you are. You have to take a look at who you are and decide what
Okay.
is important to you. And I found for me, I'm somebody that has to have something to get me up in the morning to feel useful. That's just part of my personality. So that's what I go for. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm doing the course, because those things make me feel useful. And I tell my children, if I wasn't doing that, I'd be stalking those 6 grandchildren. I might be peeking in their classes to see what they're doing. So it's a really good thing for me to have this other thing to do. And some people I have friends who, for instance, who love going down to the senior villages in Florida or in Arizona. I have friends in Arizona and Florida who love kind of the more leisure life. That's what they're looking for. That's what makes them happy. They're keeping really fit, probably more than I am. So I think you have to, first of all, find what it is in you. What is it that makes you feel useful and somebody with a purpose? And then I help them try to find out ways to do that, to get everything in order. I help people get their legacies in order. I have a legacy binder so that when I go, my kids basically, instead of shuffling through all my drawers to find everything, everything is in the binder, including my titles to my car and my social security number, my birth certificate, everything they're going to need to take care of my estates in this little binder. And so when they open up the binder, my hope is that I'm passing this legacy to them, that they say, "Oh, mom loved us so much. We're gonna be so strong after she goes. I'm so glad she did this." But just in case, I also put little Valentine letters in there. The first Valentine was delivered after St. Valentine's death, so I'm giving
Yeah.
Valentines to my kids so that they know that.
Oh,
But just getting everything in order, feeling, oh, I've done that job and now I can live my life. And if something
yeah.
happens to me, my kids are going to be okay. Because that's my thing. When something happens to me, I want my kids to be okay. That's my biggest legacy. I want my grandchildren to be okay. With the
You have that
grandchildren, it's more
internal
that
peace
resilience.
too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's so peaceful. So I can go live my life now and I don't have to worry about that anymore. I was in the back of my mind for many years. We used to get on the plane with my husband and we would call my daughter and say, "Okay, the will is here and this is over there."
Mm,
Because we'd say, "Oh, if the plane went down, we're both gone. We're in trouble." I don't do that anymore. They
yeah.
know where it is. They know where everything is. So I can just live my life fully until it's got done. And and I think it's sometimes people wait until they get a terminal diagnosis to do
Mhm.
this, and that's not a good time because you're in grief and mourning. It's best to do this when you can do it, when you can talk about it like a future. Let's have a future meeting. Let's talk about what's going to happen in the future. And then when you plan that, you're going to plan it in a way that they expect. There's no surprises because I'm sure all of us know people that were surprised by a will or a
Yep.
lack thereof, in which families were broken and didn't talk to each other forever. That's not going to happen, Mike. They know exactly what to expect. And I've set it up so that it's going to be an easy transition. And I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of like emotions, obviously, with death and just that whole process in general. So I think how you focus on that emotional side and then it's freeing up, it's just a better communication with everybody. I've had multiple family members pass now and just all kinds of things with trusts and wills and this, all kinds of stuff. So I know it can be just a lot of work for people, super stressful. But talk a little bit more about like why you think a lot of people avoid their emotions or don't want to do this. Like, why do you find that people, is it just, oh, I'll get to that later? Oh, what is it that people just avoid doing? Or why do they avoid doing?
We live in a death denying culture. We live in a culture that if you just listen to what you hear on television and so on, it's almost as if you just eat in a healthy manner and you exercise and you do all these things, which is good to do because the longer you live, the more legacy you live. So it's good to live a long time. You're just going to live forever. And then death is something that kind of comes down what does come unexpectedly, but there's someone to blame for the death. We're all going to die. So we don't like to face our death. We believe that we're going to have more time.
Hmm.
We don't think I could go out and get hit by a truck and I'm going to be fine because I got my book together, right? But
There
we
you
believe,
go.
right? We believe that we have more time, but we don't know how much time we have. And we believe that if most of us typically get a diagnosis, we don't typically die from an accident. And we think, oh, if I get diagnosed, I'll go ahead and do it. Sometimes you get diagnosed, and I have a friend who lost her mother in 6 weeks, and there was no time to do anything in 6 weeks. Another thing is that we don't, I have another person I work with who their wife was dying and she had lots of real estate in her name. So you can imagine lots of real estate in her name. But she was diagnosed with a terminal illness. She was at Mayo Clinic. She was dying. But of course, doctors don't say you're dying anymore. They don't say it. You're just, the hospice nurses will come and tell you, but the doctors don't like to tell you you're dying anymore. But she was dying and everybody knew she was dying, but they were afraid to talk to her about any of those properties, about how she was going to manage it after she went, because they felt that if they talked to her at that time, they were betraying her. They were admitting that she was dying. And so there's so many psychological things that get
Yeah.
involved in that. So that's why it's important to do it when you're well. Just get it done. And then if that happens, you don't have to worry about those conversations in a difficult moment. You can just have that done. But I think it's mainly we're a death denying culture. We just think death is going to come to other people, but not us. And also, I think we procrastinate. We know we have to do it, but we procrastinate. So like to recommend I'm getting a course that's going to be out in about a week or two. I like to recommend people do it as a group because then you have some accountability. I had my book club. On the cover of my book is my book club holding up their folders because we got together as a group and discussed how we're going to get this done. So sometimes groups can give you accountability, but you can still do it by yourself. The accountability might be your partner, but just do it. It's the clock is ticking. The time to do it is right now.
I think the procrastination, like people, like you said, they feel overwhelmed by it. There's too many things, like where do I even start, or who do I trust to put? That's estate planning sounds like some fancy things that people who have tons of money do. And so yeah, I think just like working with the coach or somebody who's been through it, like you said, like you, who can be like, okay, do this first. Cause even me thinking about it, I don't have a lot of assets and things, but even it's okay, where do you start? What do you do first? There's a
It's the
lot
word
probably.
estate. I think the word estate intimidates people for some reason. Because like, oh yeah, my estate, and they're sitting there taking a sip with their pinky out. No, yeah, I do. I think that word intimidates people a little bit. And Tanya, I think that goes to show, and actually what Kim was talking about too, just it's not just like a death denying culture that we have. It's just we're just in a culture of denial in general, right?
Yes.
You look at so many people that have these financial issues and oh yeah, I'll swipe my card or I'll do they're not thinking about the ramifications of their actions or their inaction. And I feel like a lot of people that have this inaction that they don't do anything about it, then all of a sudden they get this diagnosis and they're trying to figure out how do I do this at the end? And that example that you gave, man, it was really triggering me on the inside a little bit when you were talking about this woman with all this real estate in her name, right? Like, why haven't you transferred this over? Why is this not under an LLC or a trust for your family, like a living trust? Like, what's going on here? And yeah, I think you make a very important point there. Like, right now, while you're healthy and feeling good and you feel like you're immortal and you're never going to die, that's not the case. It comes for us all. Now's the time to put that plan in place, right? And I love how you have this binder, right? I live my life by binders. I have binders for all
Yes.
sorts of different things, but like my finances, my assets. I have a binder for my entire Navy career, like everything that I've done. So if my kids ever want to see what I did in the Navy, they could just go through page by page, all the different awards and all that other stuff, things from deployments, blah, blah, blah. But I think you leave something that they can find it and understand, and they don't need somebody to explain it to them, right? Um, so with that, I want to ask you, Kim, when you sit down with a family to sit down and actually do some coaching with them about estate planning, what would that typical conversation look like when they sit down in front of you and they're like, okay, we're here, we need to figure this out, go.
The first thing they need to know, there's only 4 steps that you need to get this done. The first one
Okay.
is to get your affairs in order, and you do need to get a professional. I'm not an attorney, so you need to get a professional in your state to get that will. Just go and do it. Get it
Sure.
done. Get that will done. Then get all your important papers together, get everything together in that binder. That's the first step. The second step is to build your legacy with the people that you have now. Build it up. Let them know how much you love them. Tell them you love them, or get those little legacy love letters made out to put in your binder. Let them build your legacy. Third step is to talk about death and dying with your family. Have that conversation and talk about death and dying. And then the fourth step is to get your emotional affairs in order. And this is so important because death is so final. If you've got someone that you're not getting along with or you've had an issue with, this is a time to forgive while you have time, apologize while you can, and reconcile like right now with everyone you can. I had the most wonderful experience with my husband. He actually died twice. He stopped breathing for 20 minutes. I actually thought he was dead. I called the hospice nurse. We were crying about his death, and all of a sudden he just took this big deep breath the day before. And I think it was a miracle. I'm sure somebody would have an explanation for that. But anyway, I say he died twice. So we had that experience. And then 24 hours later was when he finally passed away. But that first death was our signal that he was dying soon. We had no idea. We thought we'd had 6 months because he just got into hospice. And what happened was that last day, we had a party for him. We had a living funeral. We had everybody coming over. They were all on the bed with him. He got anything he wanted. He had ice cream. He was diabetic. I gave him enough insulin to take care of it. Yeah, he had whatever he wanted to eat, Diet Coke. He could have this great day. Family all around him the whole day. But what was most important is he had a brother that hadn't talked to him in 20 years. And he came in the door and he sat down on the bed next to Jim, and they had this, and they didn't talk about whatever because I can't remember all the issues that started this thing, but they didn't talk about the issues because that's all about our egos, right? They just talked about their relationship, and he even brought some of those old 8mm films, that the old ones that are, and he showed a film of them climbing Mount Whitney when Jim was about 24 years old. We had the most wonderful day, and Jim's face was just radiant. His last day on earth, he had this radiant face because he had reconciled with his brother. Now, had Jim died, I know that this would have, not only Jim would have been sad, but his brother would have known that this problem was there that was never, he never reconciled, and there would be a lot of grief over the lack of reconciliation. So it's important to know, I was a grief counselor for a while, that when somebody dies that you have not reconciled with, or you have a problem with, or there's a complicated emotional boundary between the two of you, your grief is more complicated. It's harder for you. It's so much easier for you and for your family if you just get rid of all that stuff, because the relationship is more important than the ego. And all those studies that show, the happiness studies all show that it's not the money you have, it's the quality of your relationships that is the best predictor of happiness. So make sure you get those relationships put together. And those are the things I coach them on, those 4 steps to get everything put together. You're ready to go. But not soon.
Yeah, because that part, step 4, almost sounds like almost one of the most important things that people
Yes.
put off too, or like, oh yeah, they've just
Sounds
been
like the
avoiding.
hardest thing,
Yes.
It
honestly.
is the
For
hardest
sure.
thing.
I know for me it would be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we don't like to be wrong. We're almost addicted to not being wrong. We just don't
Hmm.
like to be wrong. And really, there are times when I know I'm right, but I darn it. But the relationship is more important than my ego, whether I'm right or not. And it's an act of love. It really is an act of love when you can do that, because the relationship is more important than our egos. And it's hard. It's hard. Just like downsizing is hard. That shedding stuff, that's hard for me.
Yeah.
It's a miserable experience, but I feel so freeing afterwards. And that's the same thing. It's hard to do, but once it's done, you now are free.
Yeah.
Yeah, forgiveness is always hard, I think, for any situation, right? But to put it in that light, hey, you're trying to reconcile, so everything, you have clean slates before you leave this world.
It's a
That's tough.
legacy.
Tough. It is part
And
of the legacy, for
And in my
sure.
book, I describe Rwanda. I have 65 Eric Harms libraries in Rwanda. And the reason is, when I went there the first time, that country had its horrible genocide. You can't even imagine. It's your neighbors killing you, not an invading army. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And yet they have decided to focus on forgiveness and reconciliation now that the killers are out of jail. They were in jail for 20 years. To focus on forgiveness and reconciliation to bring people back. And the reason they did that is they realized that if they didn't do that, their children would be in the same situation they were. And now their children are growing up in one of the safest, happiest countries in Africa. It's an amazing country, Rwanda. In fact, I have friends, I go to there quite a bit by myself, and my friends are thinking, is it safe? And I said, is it safe to go to Canada? And they'll say, yeah, it's safe to go to Canada. They have the same State Department ranking. Rwanda is ranked the same safety level as Canada. And some countries in Europe that we go to all the time have a
Wow.
lower safety. It's more dangerous to go there, but people just don't realize it. But they have turned that, it's a miracle. It's something to really take
Wow.
a look at. It's just a miracle of reconciliation, where they turned this country that was just absolutely wiped out. It was a
Yeah.
horrible place at 30 years ago, and now it's this beautiful, safe country. And it's because they had the courage to forgive, and for their children's sake.
Yeah, that's one of the most
Amazing.
powerful messages you can give today. And I know we have so much good stuff that we could continue talking to you about, but we want to get into the final round and the questions we
Yes.
ask all of our guests. You might have started to touch on this before, but what is one of the biggest mistakes you've ever made when it comes to your finances or business life?
At my age, there are a lot of people that will call you when you've written a book and offer you all kinds of things to make it sound really good. But there are a lot of scammers out there, and I have fallen victim. And I think I'm a smart person, and I really watched out for scammers, but I've fallen victim to some. They did provide a service, but it was not, it was a scam where they'll call you and they'll get a little bit of money for this thing, and then they'll call you back and get a little more money for this. And then you feel like you're caught in the web, right? I got scammed, and I think many people my age have, and we don't like to admit it because we feel it's stupid to get scammed, but I've got scammed on that.
Yeah, that's I can't imagine that being an easy thing to admit to, right?
It's not.
Yeah,
But
no,
there's so many of us that do. So I'm admitting to it for all those people out there that got caught up, especially the senior citizens, because we are the big targets to
yeah.
get caught up in some type of scam.
Yeah, that's not easy. I definitely appreciate your openness with that. So, Kim, this next question, these all kind of tie into each other, and that is, what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started out? And by started out, I'll say this new journey of being an end of life coach and
Mhm.
helping people plan estates and everything like that. What is something that you've learned since you started that?
I definitely learned I bought too much stuff. That our generation
Sure.
of baby boomers, we bought stuff and I bought stuff and nobody wants my stuff. I bought the stuff thinking, oh, this, we can't assume that the next generation is going to want our stuff, but I thought they would. I just really did. And I bought too much stuff, and many of us have bought too much stuff. And sometimes the stuff will paralyze you and keep you in a place you don't need to be. I have so many friends who are in a big home that they really can't afford to be in because it takes a lot to maintain. And they stay there because they have no idea how they're going to downsize and get rid of their stuff. They know they need to move, but they can't get rid of their stuff. And it took me a while when I was in the cabin because it was a big home with a lot of stuff. And I just had to bite the bullet and downsize. And basically it was a good move because I invested in real estate that now allows me to live a nice life now.
What was it, like an episode of Hoarders at all?
Yeah,
You ever
yeah,
watch that
yeah.
show?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, no, actually, so if you look around my home, it looks perfectly fine. It's well maintained. But
So
I
you
have
go in
these
the
closets.
garage. No.
I've got, you go to the garage. That's exactly right. In fact, you go to my garage. Oh my gosh. And my daughter and son-in-law, we had a cabin. It was a home. It was our retirement. It was our dream retirement home that we built on this beautiful lake. And it had a great big boathouse for the boat. But we downsized from our former home and put all this stuff in there. It was full of stuff. And my daughter-in-law and son-in-law, my daughter and son-in-law told us when my husband was alive, they said, you guys cannot die until you clean out that boathouse. And my husband died anyway. He did. He just didn't listen to him, and
He's
he
like,
went,
nope.
and I was left. I know I was left with the boathouse. So I have now downsized that big. I just gave stuff away. I had family and relatives, and I didn't. I mean, then we cling to the value. Oh, we can't. I spent $2,000 on that. I just can't let that go.
Ooh.
And you know what? Just let it go. Yeah, let it go. If you want to sell it, if you can, I'm not very good at like garage sales and stuff. I don't have patience for that. So if you have the patience for a garage sale and for selling, go for it. Do it. But if you don't, just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. And when you do, I am so free right now. I'm free because I know my kids are not going to have to do that themselves. And not having that stuff to take care of is very freeing. So I just recommend that for all of you, all those out there that they don't want to downsize or they're stuck where they are. And sometimes they're stuck to where it's dangerous because we get to a point where we need to be on one level and stairs are dangerous. Don't keep yourself in that house because you're afraid to downsize. Just do it.
Yeah, no, that's a huge lesson. It's, you always hear people say, it's, you spend all these years accumulating, and then the whole, yeah, final quarter, it's get rid of it, get rid of it. But it's like being able to detach that emotional
Mhm.
side, detachment from your stuff, even if it's like a memory. Because my mom, I still
Yeah.
have 2 bins from my childhood. I've downsized on that stuff a lot. Why are you you're throwing this away? Like she'll say, it's your attachment to it, not mine. Like I'm never gonna use, what am I gonna do? But that is it is a freeing thing. And yeah, it's like the stuff that people
Mhm.
buy and the stuff that we have today is just insane. So
Right.
yeah,
And I'd
huge.
have so much more money in my retirement fund if I didn't buy all that stuff.
That's fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips or tricks that you recommend to someone who's just getting started with, say, real estate planning or just figuring this out, this part of their life?
Yes, I would say just start now. Make the call. If you don't have a will, make the call today, because the biggest problem is procrastination, and you can't procrastinate because you don't know how much time you have. Make the call today. Call for your will today, get it done, and then start building your legacy. You can start building your legacy right now. I had my little granddaughter over last night. We had lots of fun, and I want them to remember me as adventure grandma. This is how I want them to remember me. So we went and had adventures last night. Just start doing those little things. Remember, it's your relationships that bring happiness. Money's helpful because that's important too, but it was a relationship. So get your estate in order, build your relationships, and then start gathering all your stuff. It doesn't take that long. I was surprised, and I don't have a very good filing system. It doesn't take that long to get those important papers and put them in those page protectors. I put them in page protectors, and then I put a piece of Scotch tape over the top so that it's completely sealed, so it's not going to fall out. It really is easy to do that, but you just have to start.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Okay. That is all of the hard questions of the final round. I've got you for the last one here. And so, Kim, I want to ask you, and I'll preface this with besides your own, because you talked about your book a little bit, and we'll get to that in a second. But do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both?
Of course, your podcast is the best one out there. You know that. So let's just go with that right there.
Here it is.
And
Love it.
and
Thank you.
it's great.
Ever since we
Um,
brought Tanya up on, we shot up to number one right there. So
Yeah,
there you
number
go.
one.
There you go. I think it's nice to have two people on a podcast. I think it's really nice to have two people. Actually, one of the books, and it's not necessarily a real estate book, but it's a book about, now that I'm doing some coaching and things like that. It's a surprise. It's off to the side, but one of my favorite books is called The Trust Edge by David Horsager. Are you familiar with that at all?
mm-mm.
And
No.
it's called The Trust Edge. And what it does is it breaks, because trust, okay, so with money, okay, and I got scammed because I trusted somebody I shouldn't have trusted. But
Sure.
I think that as someone who has a side gig doing this kind of thing, I want people to trust me. I want to be trustworthy.
Mhm.
And this book breaks trust down into 8 pillars. And I like things broken into pillars, like just like trust is, what does trust mean? 8 pillars of trust that are just essential for trust. And one of the things I got from that book was, you can spend all kinds of time building up trust, and it just takes one thing that you do to break it to pieces.
Ooh,
So I
Mm.
think before you start in anything, become trustworthy. I think trust is the most important asset to anything that you do.
I
that's
like
amazing.
it.
I listened to the Lewis Howes podcast, The Summit of Greatness, or greatness. And he asked the question at the end, what's your definition of greatness? And one of the guests last week said something about trust. That was the whole
Yeah.
thing, is like, trust is a superpower, and being able to trust yourself, that too, trust yourself, and then build trust so other people can trust you, and trusting other people is
Right.
like one of the biggest things. That's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yes.
Where can people find more information? Where do people find your book, your website? How can they connect with you? We're like, okay, Kim, I need help. What am I doing with my life? Help me figure this out. Where can they find you?
Yes, you can go. My course is coming out around the first week of November, and you can get access to it by just going to my website, drkimberlyharms.com. And a book link is on there too. And the book is Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For. And the last half of the book, the last half is a step-by-step instruction of everything you need to do to get your affairs in order, get your estate in order. And I like to call it, instead of estate planning, I like to call it legacy planning, because really
Yeah.
that just makes it seem a little more focused on your legacy, because that's what it is.
I love the name of the book.
Mhm. Thank you.
Really good to die for. I just love how you did that little pun in there.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
just the initial main title, the Are You Ready? That just, man, that scares the hell out of me. Whenever you ask me that question, I was like, oh man, am I?
That's
Like
right.
every time you got
That's
to
right.
ask yourself that, it's okay, you're not.
Right.
So
Right. And there's only 4 steps. Just get those 4 steps
yeah,
done.
yeah.
You can do it. The only problem is
I
you got to
have a
start like
will. I just
now.
got to get it redone.
Well,
I got to
right, right.
redo
And
it.
then
So,
there you go. And you have to update. That's the only thing. You got to update. And I'm going to
yeah.
be sending out with my course, I'm going to send out yearly updates, just reminding everyone to take a look and update everything.
Nice. Nice. Okay. Fantastic. Kim, this has been super informative, super fun. Your story is amazing. You've been through so much in your life, right? And I think resiliency is the key word here, right? You've built up this resiliency and you've used it to turn some rough times into lessons learned that you can use to help other people. And the fact that you use that experience to help other people is very selfless, and we really appreciate that. When we have guests on here that really truly give themselves to help others and help serve others, that holds a special place in my heart for sure, for Tanya as well. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure our listeners do too. So with that said, I want to ask you, as we close things out here, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yes. Yes. And addressing what you just said, what I find, I've been in the bottom of that grief pit. I've been down in the bottom, and it's a terrible place to live. And I had a
Yeah.
wonderful cousin who told me, just was wagging his finger in my face and said, "Don't you dare let your children feel that they are not enough," because he had lost a brother at about the same time that we lost our son. So looking at that and trying to rebuild your life when you've been in the bottom of the grief pit, and then you go back a couple of times. That's just how life is. Understand that your grief, how you present yourself, affects not just you, but everybody around you. And by fighting, screaming, kicking, clawing your way out of that grief pit to breathe that fresh air again and be there fully for the people in your life, you're not only helping yourself, you're helping everybody around you. And the thing about giving, which is really amazing, is that every time you give, we're all in this world together. And I think our big job is just to help each other through. When you get older, you can help other people through because you've been through a lot of stuff. But when you give, you get back just the endorphins of giving. Even if the other person isn't accepting, when you're giving something, it's amazing what it does to your level of joy. It just gives it right back. So giving is a win situation all the time. And it's just a helpful, when you can do that in your life. My goal is, of course, I'm a person of faith, so I want to go up to God and give me a high five and say, "Good job, Kim." But I also want my children and my grandchildren to live a resilient life, and I want them to live a joyful life, and I want them to flourish. And one of the best ways I can help them do that is to do it myself. So that's my story.
Love that. Love that. Thank you so much, Kim. This has been phenomenal. Again, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with Tanya and I today and with our audience and to share your story and to share your legacy with us. So we really appreciate that. And I also want to thank every single one of our listeners right now. I just want to thank you so much for joining Tanya, myself, and our special guest, Dr. Kim Harms, today on the Average Joe Finances podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much again, Kim, and our audience. Thanks so much. Go leave us that 5-star review and let us know what you're going to take away from today's episode. And please share it with somebody who needs this as well, because we know a lot of people do.
Absolutely. All right. Aloha from Hawaii,
And bye from Lake Tahoe.
and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.